A woman arrives in a small western town with nothing but a worn dress and a secret that could get them both killed. A man with blood on his past and walls around his heart. One desperate question. One impossible yes. What starts as a deal becomes the truest love either of them has ever known, if they can survive long enough to feel it. Here, we tell the stories the West whispered quietly, of love that grew in the hardest soil, of mothers and children separated by fate and reunited by grace, of strangers who looked at each other and chose to stay. The arrangements we make out of desperation sometimes become the greatest blessings we never dared to pray for. Subscribe so you're here when the next story drops. Share this one if it touched your heart. And let us know in the comments, did you see the ending coming?
The woman did not back down. She just stood there waiting for his answer, while the whole town watched. Cole's hands, scarred from things best left unsaid, tightened on the reins. "Get out of my way," he said, his voice low and cold. But the woman stood her ground. "I cannot," she whispered. Around them the town was frozen, watching a showdown they did not understand. "Are you drunk?" Cole asked, leaning down. "No." "Maybe a little crazy," she admitted. "But I am all out of options." He saw she was young, too young for the weariness in her eyes. She looked like she had been running for a long, long time. "I know who you are," she said, her voice finding some strength. "Everyone does. That is why I am asking you. I know you are the kind of man who does not ask a lot of questions." She took a tiny step closer. "I know you live alone and do not care what these folks think. I know you are the only man in 3 counties who might just say yes." Just then, Sheriff Garrett pushed through the crowd. "Ma'am, you need to step away from Mr. Hawkins." But she never took her eyes off Cole. "Please," she said one last time, "I will work for my keep. Just give me a safe place to be before nightfall." When the sheriff put a hand on her arm, she jumped back like she had been snake-bit. Cole saw that fear. It was not a fear of him. "Sheriff," Cole's voice cut sharp as a razor, "let her go." The sheriff's hand dropped like a hot rock. "What is your name?" Cole asked her. "Amelia," she said. "Amelia Carter. From Philadelphia. I came here to get married," she explained. "But the man who brought me is gone. He took every last dollar I had 3 days ago. Now the hotel man says he will have me arrested if I do not pay by tonight." The sheriff started to mumble about sorting things out, but Amelia turned on him with fire in her eyes. "Can you get my money back from a man who does not exist? Can you find me a place to go that is not back to a family that cast me out?" The sheriff had no answer. Nobody did. Cole swung down from his horse. He stood a full head taller than her. "You know the stories about me?" he asked quietly. "Yes? And you are still asking?" "I do not have a choice." He looked at her a long moment, then turned to the sheriff. "She has not broken any law, has she?" "Well, no, but then she is free to go where she pleases." Cole looked back at Amelia. "Can you ride?" She nodded. He got back on his horse, then held out a hand. "Come on." A murmur went through the crowd as he pulled her up behind him. She wrapped her arms tight around his waist, shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Hold on," was all he said. They rode out of Redwood Valley, leaving a cloud of dust and 100 gaping mouths behind them. 20 minutes down the trail, Cole finally spoke. "Where are we going?" Amelia asked, her voice small. "To my ranch. Another hour." "What was his name?" Cole asked out of the blue. "The man who robbed you." "Thomas Brennan," she said. "At least that is what he called himself. He was tall, with a scar on his left hand." "Why?" Cole's voice was flat. "Because if I ever see him in Redwood Valley, I want to know who I am looking at." There was no joking in his tone. "Thank you," she whispered, a little knot of fear loosening inside her. "Do not thank me yet," he said. "You have not seen the place." The ranch came into view as the sun set. It was a small, solid-looking house made of logs and stone, sitting all by itself in a wide valley. There was a barn and a corral, but no other soul for miles. "You live here all alone?" Amelia asked as he helped her down. "That is the whole point of it," he said. Her legs felt like jelly after the long ride. Cole led the horse to the barn, leaving her standing in the yard as the sky turned orange and gold. It was beautiful, but terrifying. She was alone, in the middle of nowhere, with a man everyone called a killer. And she had asked for this. "Are you coming inside or planning to sleep with the coyotes?" Cole's voice called from the lighted doorway. Amelia took a shaky breath and walked toward the house. Inside was clean and simple. There was a big stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, and a small kitchen. It was not what she expected at all. A sink with a hand pump and shelves full of canned goods. He pointed to the only other door. "That is the bedroom." Cole was already pulling a blanket from a corner trunk. "You can take the bed. I will sleep out here on the sofa." Amelia shook her head. "I cannot do that." "Yes, you can." He tossed the blanket onto the worn-out couch. "I do not sleep much anyhow." The room was tiny, and Amelia felt trapped. She was suddenly aware of how close they would be. "I meant what I said about working," she told him. "We can talk about it in the morning," Cole replied, heading for the door. "Use the pump for water and eat whatever you find. Bolt this door after me." "You're going back out?" He nodded. "The horses need tending. I will not be long." He stopped and looked her right in the eye. "But you use that bolt. Do not open this door for anyone but me. How will I know it is you? Because anyone else who comes here will not bother knocking." Then he was gone. Amelia slid the heavy bolt into place and finally let herself cry. She woke to the rich smell of coffee, completely forgetting where she was until the last day came rushing back. The terror, the escape, the ranch. She remembered locking the bolt, then unlocking it sometime before dawn when Cole returned. She shot up in a panic. Cole was at the stove with his back to her. "There is a basin in the bedroom," he said without turning. "The water is still warm if you want to wash up." Amelia moved slowly, her whole body aching. "What time is it?" he answered. "Close to 7? You let me sleep. You needed it." He poured coffee into 2 tin cups. "You will need your strength today." "Why is that?" He finally turned, holding a cup out to her. His face gave nothing away. "Because if you plan on staying here, you're going to work. On a ranch, the work starts at dawn." She took the cup. The coffee was strong and hot. "I told you I would work. Saying it and doing it are 2 different things." He just looked at her. "Try me," she said. A flicker of something crossed his face, almost like amusement. "Finish your coffee, then meet me in the barn." Amelia drank the bitter brew and went to wash her face. The woman in the mirror was a stranger with tangled hair and dark circles under her eyes. But she was alive, and she had a purpose. That was more than she had yesterday. The barn was much larger on the inside, with 6 stalls. 3 held horses, and the rest was filled with hay and equipment. Cole was already cleaning a stall with smooth, practiced motions. "Grab a shovel," he said, without looking at her. Amelia found one and walked to the next stall. The horse inside, a big bay with a white star on his head, watched her with suspicion. "His name is Thunder," Cole warned, "and he bites." "Good to know," she replied. "I am serious. He has taken a piece out of 3 other ranch hands." "Then why do you keep him?" "Because when it counts, he is faster than any other horse in this valley." Thunder snorted and stomped a hoof. "Can I touch him?" she asked. "Only if you want to lose a finger." She ignored the warning and held her hand out slowly. The horse flattened his ears. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice sharp. "Shh," Amelia whispered to the horse. "It is all right. I am not going to hurt you." Thunder's nostrils flared. He took a cautious step forward, then another, until his soft nose bumped her hand. Cole stopped his work and just stared. Amelia smiled for the first time in days as she stroked the big horse. "See? You are not so scary." "That is impossible," Cole stated plainly. "What is? That horse despises everyone. Maybe he just needed someone who was not afraid of him." She looked over Thunder's back at Cole. Does that sound familiar? For the first time, Cole Hawkins almost smiled. Almost. Get back to work, he said, but the hard edge was gone from his voice. By noon, Amelia's hands were raw with blisters. By sunset, she could barely move, but she never once complained. Cole watched her as they worked. She fed horses, fixed a fence, and hauled water. She stumbled and dropped things, but every single time she got right back up and tried again. That is enough, Cole finally said as the sun disappeared. Go on inside. I will finish up here. I can help, she insisted. You can barely walk, he said, taking the bucket from her. Go. She wanted to argue, but her tired body won the fight. Cole watched her walk to the house. For 5 years, he had built a life of solitude, a life where nobody asked him for anything. Now, a woman who had looked him in the eye without fear was sleeping under his roof. She was desperate enough to be brave, and Lord help him, he could not turn her away. When Cole went inside an hour later, he found Amelia asleep at the table, her head resting on her arms next to a half-eaten plate of beans. He knew she was trouble, but she was also something else, something brave he had not seen in a long time. He gently lifted her into his arms. She mumbled something in her sleep and curled against his chest, weighing almost nothing. He carried her to the bedroom, laid her on the bed, and pulled the blanket over her. Her face looked peaceful for the first time. Cole went back to the main room and sat on the sofa, staring into the fire until morning. For 3 days, their life fell into a simple pattern. They worked from dawn until dusk, ate in silence, and slept. Amelia learned the rhythms of the ranch with surprising speed. She learned how to handle the animals and how to fix things around the property. She even figured out how to patch a fence so well that Cole did not have to redo her work. She also learned that Cole Hawkins was a man of very few words. He gave orders and corrected her mistakes, but he never talked about himself. He never explained why a man who knew so much about ranching was living all alone. On the 4th day, Amelia decided she had to know more. They were feeding the horses in the barn. "Can I ask you something?" she began. "No," he said. "Why did you bring me here?" Cole kept scooping feed. "I did not say you could stay forever. You brought me to your home. That is not the same thing." "Then what is it?" He finally turned to face her. "It is a place for you to stay until you can get on your feet. And then you leave." His voice was final. "That is how this works, Miss Carter. What if I do not want to leave?" The question hung between them. Cole's eyes narrowed. "In my experience, everyone leaves." "Not everyone," she challenged. He turned back to the feed bin. "Do not try to make this something it is not." "I am not," she said, her voice rising with frustration. "I'm just trying to understand. Why would you help a stranger just to turn them out later?" The question hung in the air, and Cole's control finally snapped. He confessed he was tired of being the man everyone was afraid of, that for once he wanted to be someone people turned to for help. Amelia moved closer, her voice gentle, saying that was exactly what she needed to hear. In that moment, he saw she wasn't scared of him at all. She told him flatly that if he were the monster people claimed, she would already be gone. Instead, she was still there, and it was far too late for her not to care. Cole looked at this woman who had cracked open his solitary life in just 4 days. He knew it was a mistake, but he heard himself agreeing she could stay. But it had to be his way. She would work, keep to herself, and if anyone from town started asking questions, she had to tell them they were married. A quiet arrangement, just a practical matter. Amelia was stunned, but she knew he was right about how folks would talk. A woman living with him without a ring on her finger would cause a storm of gossip. She finally agreed to the plan, married in name only. She had one more condition. If they were pretending to be married, he ought to call her Amelia. He tried the name out, his voice low and careful. She said she would call him Cole. They shook on it, their calloused hands sealing the strange bargain. The deal felt like both a promise and a warning. Not 3 days later, Sheriff Garrett rode up to the ranch in a cloud of dust, looking for trouble. Amelia was out back, trying to bring a patch of sad-looking dirt back to life when she heard Cole's sharp voice telling the sheriff he was trespassing. Garrett ignored him, saying he had heard talk in town that Cole had gotten married. Cole finally admitted it was true. The sheriff scoffed, pointing out Cole did not even know the woman. Then he dropped a bombshell. He had sent a telegraph to Philadelphia and found no record of any Amelia Carter. Her heart pounding, Amelia walked around the house to face them. She quietly explained that Carter was her mother's maiden name. She had used it to run from her father, a powerful judge who had threatened to have her arrested for stealing family jewelry. "So you are a fugitive," Garrett said, his hand moving toward his gun. Before Amelia could answer, Cole stepped between them like a stone wall. He declared that she was his wife now, and that made her his business, not the law's. His voice dropped low, telling the sheriff to leave unless he had a warrant. After a long, hard stare, Garrett mounted his horse, his final glare at Amelia, promising this was far from over. Once he was gone, Cole turned to her and asked for her real name. "Amelia Rothschild," she said, explaining her father was Judge Harold Rothschild. After her mother died, her father remarried a woman who wanted her gone. When Amelia asked for her inheritance, her father claimed it was gone. She took her mother's pearl necklace, the only thing she had left, and sold it to come west. Her father, wanting the necklace for his new wife, accused her of theft and threatened to ruin her. Cole stood silent for a long time. He just said, "Lies have a way of catching up to you. You are Amelia Hawkins now, and that has to mean something." The next morning, after a sleepless night, Cole told her they needed a real plan. If her father was as powerful as she said, he could make trouble for them both. He believed the judge would not like losing control over something he considered his property, and that included his daughter. Cole's plan was simple and direct. They would ride into town that day and make the marriage legal. A registered marriage certificate would be her best defense. It would show she was not hiding, but simply living her life. It was a risk, but it was the only real choice they had. Getting him in trouble across state lines. It might not sit well with his powerful friends. Cole took a sip of his coffee. "It is a risk no matter what we do. But this way, you have legal protection. I will have the right to tell people to mind their own business. The town cannot spread rumors about something that is official record." Amelia knew he was right. There was no other way. "All right," she agreed. "We will make it official today." "Today," Cole confirmed with a sharp nod. "Get dressed. We ride in 1 hour." Redwood Valley was different in the daylight, especially when you were not running for your life. Amelia sat behind Cole on his horse, trying to ignore the stares as they rode down the main street. Shopkeepers peered from their windows and people stopped to whisper. By the time they got to the county clerk's office, the whole town was watching. The clerk was a small man with ink-stained fingers. He looked up and his face went white when he saw who it was. "Mr. Hawkins, what can I do for you?" "I need to register a marriage," Cole said, taking off his hat. "This is my wife, Amelia." The clerk's eyes darted between them. "I see," he stammered. "And when did this happen?" "A week ago, in a private ceremony." The clerk shook his head. "Mr. Hawkins, I am sorry, but without witnesses, this document is not valid." A firm voice cut through the silence from the doorway. "I will witness it." They all turned to see Mrs. Eleanor Pritchard, the town schoolteacher. She was a stern woman in her 50s who always spoke her mind. "I saw them take their vows." Amelia stared, speechless, but Cole found his voice. "Much obliged, Mrs. Pritchard." "I am not doing this for you, Cole Hawkins," she said, walking right up to the desk. "I am doing it for this young lady. She deserves better than to have her good name dragged through the mud." Mrs. Pritchard's gaze softened as she looked at Amelia. "I do not know your troubles, child, but I know when someone needs a helping hand. I will sign what needs to be signed." Amelia whispered, "Why?" "Because I know what it is like to have everyone turn their back on you," Mrs. Pritchard answered gently. The clerk cleared his throat, still flustered. "I will still need one more witness." I will do it, a new voice said. Dr. Samuel Chen stood there, a kind-eyed man about 40. I was just passing by. Cole's jaw set hard. You sure about that, Doc? Folks will talk. Let them, Dr. Chen said with a small smile. I have been dealing with town gossip since I moved here from San Francisco 10 years ago. And just like that, with two unlikely saviors, Cole Hawkins and Amelia Rothschild were legally wed. The clerk quickly filled out the certificate. Cole signed his name and then handed the pen to Amelia. She paused for a heartbeat, then wrote clearly, Amelia Marie Hawkins. It was finished. But when they stepped outside, a crowd was waiting. It was not a mob, but it was enough to make Amelia shrink closer to Cole. Sheriff Garrett stood right at the front. So it is true, Garrett said flatly. You married her. That is what the paper says, Cole replied, his voice calm and steady. You know, people are going to talk about this. People always talk, Cole said, taking Amelia's hand in public for the first time. She is my wife now. Anyone with a problem can bring it to me. His tone left no room for argument. For a long moment, the town was silent. Then Mrs. Pritchard stepped forward, a surprising smile on her face. Well, I think this is wonderful news for our town. She looked right at Amelia. You are both welcome at the church social next Sunday, Mrs. Hawkins. I do not think, Cole began. You are a married man now, Mrs. Pritchard cut in. That makes you part of this community, and a community looks after its own. She scanned the crowd. Is that not right? A few people nodded, and a quiet murmur of agreement followed. Sheriff Garrett's face grew dark. This is not over, Cole. Yes, it is, Cole said, meeting his stare. Unless you have a real crime to charge me with, Sheriff, I suggest you leave us be. Garrett grumbled, then turned and walked away, the crowd slowly breaking apart. But Amelia saw one face that froze her to the bone. A tall, elegant woman in fine clothes watched her with a calculating look. When their eyes met, the woman gave a cold smile. Amelia squeezed Cole's arm. We need to go, now. He did not ask why. He just got her on the horse and swung up behind her. Once they were clear of town, Amelia finally spoke. That woman in the crowd with the dark hair and fancy dress, did you see her? I saw her, Cole said, his voice grim. She checked into the hotel 2 days ago, said she was looking for investments. She is lying, Amelia choked out. How do you know? Because that is Victoria Rothschild, my father's wife, Amelia whispered. And if she is here, it means he knows exactly where I am. They rode the rest of the way in heavy silence. At the ranch, Cole stared off at the mountains for a long time. Tell me everything, he finally said. No more secrets. So she did. She told him about her father, a powerful judge, and his new wife, Victoria, who only wanted his money. She explained how Victoria had turned everyone against her and plotted with her father to have her sent to an asylum. That is when I ran away, Amelia confessed. I sold my mother's necklace to get here. I thought they would never look for me as a mail-order bride. She gave a short, bitter laugh. I was wrong. Cole was quiet for a long time. They cannot force you to go back, he said. You are my wife now. Your father has no legal claim. The law does not matter to him, Cole. He is a federal judge. He will create any claim he wants, not without proof. He will make proof. You do not understand. My father never loses. He will ruin anyone who gets in his way. Her voice cracked. I never should have involved you in this. You did not drag me into anything, he said firmly. But now you are in danger because of me. I have been in danger my whole life, Cole stated. Her being here changes nothing. We stick to the plan. You are my wife, and this is your home. If anyone tries to take you from it, they have to come through me. You cannot fight a federal judge. Watch me." His certainty should have been a comfort, but it only filled her with terror. She had learned the hard way that sometimes the monsters win, and the people you care about get hurt. That night, Amelia could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the ranch and Cole's steady breathing from the other room. He had been so patient and kind to her. Now she had repaid him by putting his entire life at risk. "I can hear you thinking from in here." His voice came from the doorway, making her jump. "I am sorry," she said, sitting up. "Did I wake you? I was not asleep. Are you all right?" "No," she answered honestly. "I want to figure out how to make Victoria leave without destroying you." "That is not your job." "Yes, it is. She is here because of me." "And you are here because of me," Cole countered, leaning against the door frame. "If we are passing out blame, there is enough to share." A small smile almost touched her lips. "So, what do we do?" "We wait," he said. "We see what she does next. And we prepare." "Prepare how?" Cole walked into the room, his face cut by moonlight and shadows. "Tomorrow I start teaching you how to shoot a gun." "What? Why?" "Because if your father is willing to lock you away in an asylum," he said, his eyes meeting hers, "he is willing to do much worse, and I will not always be there to protect you." "You have to learn to defend yourself," Cole said, his eyes serious. Amelia's heart hammered. "I don't think I can." "You can. You faced down a horse, worked till you bled and stood up to the law. You're tougher than you give yourself credit for." He stood there in the moonlight, his belief in her so strong it hurt. She could only nod. "All right," she whispered. "Teach me." Before leaving, he paused. "And Amelia, you're not alone in this fight." For the first time, she felt a sliver of hope. The gun felt heavy and cold in her hands, a tool for taking life. "You're holding it like a snake," Cole remarked from behind her in the clearing. "Loosen up your shoulders." "I'm trying." He stepped in, adjusting her stance. "Breathe. Fear is the real enemy, not the gun." She fired, and the recoil almost threw her. The bullet missed by a mile. Again and again she fired, missing every time. After the 10th shot, she was shaking. "I can't do this." "You're learning," he corrected, reloading the pistol. "Failing is how you learn. You think I was a natural? I shot my own foot the first time I tried. My pa just about died laughing." Amelia stared. "You're kidding." "I'm not," he said, his eyes telling the truth. "Everyone starts somewhere, Amelia. The ones who survive are the ones who get back up." Taking a breath, she said, "One more time." "That's my girl," he said softly. The words gave her strength. She aimed, squeezed the trigger, and a can flew off the log. His hand landed on her shoulder. "There it is." They practiced every morning. Soon she could hit most targets and reload without looking. By the end of the week, she was fast enough to be dangerous. "You're a natural," Cole said, watching her hit 5 straight. "Better than most fellas I know." "That's because I know I have a lot to learn." She lowered the gun. "Can I ask you why you really agreed to marry me? Don't just say you were lonely. There's more to it." Cole took a long pause. "You remind me of my sister." Amelia was stunned. "I did not know you had one." "Not anymore," he said, his jaw tight. "She died from a fever 10 years back. I was away on a cattle drive." He explained that his sister was brave and curious, just like Amelia. "Partly I helped because you are like her. But mostly it was your courage. You stood in front of my horse and just asked for help, no apologies." Cole's voice grew rough with regret. "She deserved better. I chose the work over her, and she died alone." "The fever killed her, not you," Amelia insisted. "Survival means nothing if you lose the folks you're surviving for." He met her eyes. "That is why I said yes. I would not make that same mistake twice. This time, I was going to be there." Before she could thank him, Cole warned, "Do not thank me yet. Victoria is still out there." Just then, hoofbeats pounded up the path. It was Dr. Chen riding hard. "Cole, we have a problem," he said out of breath. "Federal marshals. Victoria showed up with papers claiming Amelia stole over $10,000 in Philadelphia." Amelia felt sick. "It is a lie." "I know," Chen said, "but the papers look official. The mayor is pressuring Garrett to arrest you. Victoria says if you do not hand Amelia over by sundown, they will arrest you for harboring a fugitive." Cole's voice was cold as steel. "Let them try." "They will arrest her and send her to an asylum," Amelia finished, her hands trembling. "That was her plan all along." "Over my dead body," Cole growled. "That can be arranged," a voice drawled from the path. It was Victoria, flanked by two men wearing marshal badges. Her smile was pure poison. "Hello, Amelia. Been a chore tracking you down." "What do you want, Victoria?" Amelia asked, standing her ground. "For you to come home, dear. Your father is worried sick, running off, stealing, marrying this gunman. It is clear you are unwell." Victoria's sweet tone was sickening. Turning to the marshals, she said, "Gentlemen, you can see she is not in her right mind. We must take her back for treatment." A marshal with a scarred cheek stepped forward. "Mrs. Hawkins, you will have to come with us." "She is not going anywhere," Cole said, blocking Amelia. "Your federal papers do not mean spit in Colorado territory without a local judge's signature. And I do not see Sheriff Garrett with you." The marshal's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "It is a fact," Cole replied, his hand near his gun. "Cole, do not," Amelia whispered. "They will just bring more men." "Then let them," he said, his gaze locked on hers. "We face this together." Victoria let out a cold laugh. "How sweet." "But you do not get it, Amelia. Your father does not just want you back. He wants you broken." Victoria's smile was all sugar and poison. She looked right past Amelia to Cole. "Tell me, Mr. Hawkins, did my stepdaughter mention our family's connections? The judges, the politicians, we prefer the word influential." She pulled a paper from her saddlebag. "This is a writ of extradition. It means she comes with us now, or you'll be arrested for obstruction." She gave him a sweet, condescending look. "Or you can just let her go. No trouble for you." For a tense second, Amelia's heart stopped, afraid he'd take the deal. Then Cole spoke, his voice hard as iron. "I've got a counteroffer. You ride on out of here and tell Judge Rothschild if he wants his daughter, he can come get her himself. I'm not handing her over to hired guns." That sweet smile vanished from Victoria's face. As one of her marshals reached for his gun, Dr. Chen fired a warning shot straight into the air. Before anyone else could react, Cole had his own pistol drawn, aimed right at Victoria's heart. "The next person who moves dies," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Starting with her." Victoria turned pale. After a long, heavy silence, she pulled her horse back. "This isn't over. My husband will destroy you both." Cole didn't even blink. "He can try. Now get off my land." As they rode off, Dr. Chen finally holstered his weapon. "That was incredibly foolish," he said. Cole lowered his gun. "Yeah, but it bought us time." He looked at Amelia. "Time to fight back. Your father is a powerful man. He must have enemies." Cole's gaze was hard as flint. His plan was simple. Find every man Judge Rothschild ever crossed and make them our friends. Dr. Chen sent the telegraphs, looking for anyone in Philadelphia who hated the judge enough to help us. But even then, there was no promise they would stand against a federal judge for a woman they did not know. So Cole decided to give them a reason. We would prove Victoria and the judge were nothing but thieves. Amelia said her mother's estate was worth over $50,000. That was a fortune, and every penny should have gone to her when she turned 21. Instead, her father claimed she had spent it all, which was a lie. Cole figured the judge had stolen it himself, likely hiding the money in his new wife's name. If we could prove he embezzled from his own daughter, we could bring him to ruin. But how could they prove it from so far away? Cole's plan was to set a trap. We would make her father think he had won. Then, when he came to gloat, we would get him to confess everything. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. That night, Amelia wrote letters by the lamplight. She wrote to anyone who might remember her mother, begging for any scrap of information that could help. Across the table, Cole cleaned his guns, the silence heavy between them. They were at war now. "You ought to get some sleep," Cole said after a long while. "We have a fight ahead of us." She looked at the man who was risking everything for her, a stranger he had married out of kindness. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "It would be easier to just let them take me." "Easier is not always right," he answered. "But you hardly know me." "I know enough," he said. He put down the pistol he was cleaning and looked straight at her. "I know you are brave. I know you stood in front of my horse and asked for help instead of just giving up." He paused for a moment. "And I know if I let them take you, I will spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have done more. I am tired of wondering about folks I should have saved." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to tell him he owed her nothing. But more than that, she did not want to face the dark alone. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Always." She took a deep breath. "Earlier today, when you called me your girl, did you mean it?" Cole was silent for a beat. "What do you reckon?" She stood and walked right up to him. "I reckon this arrangement between us is not as fake as we have been pretending." "No," he said, looking up at her. "It is not." "Then what is it?" she asked. "I do not know." His voice was rough with emotion. "But I know I care what happens to you, and that scares the hell out of me." Her hand touched his cheek before she could think. His skin was warm and rough from a hard life. "You scare me too," she whispered. "Good," he said, standing up. He was so close now she could smell the leather and gunpowder on him. "Fear means you are paying attention." Then he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and full of all the things they could not say. She kissed him back like he was the very air she needed to breathe. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "This makes things complicated," he said. "Everything is already complicated," she replied. He nodded. "Tonight, can we just be?" "Yeah," he agreed, pulling her into a tight embrace. Outside, a storm was brewing, but in his arms, she felt safe. Amelia woke up the next morning alone in her bed. In the kitchen, Cole was at the stove, flipping eggs as if their world had not just been turned upside down. "We have got company coming," he said before she could speak. "Mrs. Pritchard and about half the women from the church are heading this way." He finally looked at her, his eyes warm. "Looks like word got out. They are coming to show their support." Sure enough, a wagon full of determined-looking women pulled up just a few minutes later. Mrs. Pritchard marched to the door like a general. "We have brought food," she announced, "and we are not leaving until the whole town knows we stand with you and your wife." Amelia's eyes started to tear up. "Mrs. Pritchard, you do not have to do this." "Yes, we do," the older woman declared. "That Victoria woman was in town yesterday, bragging about dragging you back to Philadelphia in chains. We will not let some city woman bother one of our own." The church ladies stayed for 3 hours, filling the kitchen with food and the house with hope. After they left, Cole shook his head with a smile. "That woman is terrifying. I would rather face a gang of outlaws." Just then, he saw a rider approaching. It was not Victoria. It was Sheriff Garrett, and he had 4 deputies with him. "Stay inside," Cole said, his hand going to his gun. "No," Amelia stood right beside him. "We are in this together." Garrett got off his horse, looking troubled. "Cole, Judge Rothschild sent another telegram. He is sending federal agents to arrest you both if you do not turn her over by morning." "Let them come," Cole said flatly. "Damn it, Cole, this is not a game," Garrett yelled. "They will bring 20 men and they will shoot. Then I will have to be quicker." A young deputy stepped forward, his hands trembling. "Please, sir, it is not worth dying for." Before Cole could answer, Amelia spoke to the young man. "What is your name?" "Michael, ma'am." "How old are you, Michael?" 20. "Do you have a family?" "Yes, ma'am. My mother and 2 sisters." "What if it was your sister they were after?" Amelia's voice was steady as a rock. "Accused of a crime she never did, threatened with being locked away in some dark asylum. Would you all tell her it wasn't worth the fight?" Michael flushed red. "That's different." "No, it is not," she said, looking right at them. "My father is a liar, and my stepmother is a thief. They want to destroy me, and you are helping them. If you make me go back, you are no better than cowards." One of the deputies mumbled they were just following orders. Sheriff Garrett's jaw was tight. "Mrs. Hawkins, I understand you are upset." "Upset?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Sheriff, I am terrified, because when I go back I disappear for good. So if you aim to arrest me, then do it. But do not pretend it is for justice. You are just afraid to stand up to a powerful man." A heavy silence fell until Michael finally spoke. "Sheriff, what if she is telling the truth?" Garrett's voice wavered. "Orders are orders. Orders are... Well, that is where you are wrong." Dr. Chen came riding up fast, his face flushed. "I just got word back by telegram. Judge Rothschild has been under investigation for 6 months." Garrett stared, stunned. "Turns out the judge made a lot of enemies in Philadelphia," Dr. Chen continued, pulling out a folder. "Lawyers there say he's been stealing from estates for years. I have got statements right here. They prove Amelia's mother left her over $60,000. Money Amelia never saw a dime of." "That does not prove," Garrett began. "It proves he stole from his own daughter," Dr. Chen cut him off. "And that makes every charge against her a lie. He moved the money to his new wife's accounts, but left a paper trail a mile wide. You were right, Amelia, you are not going back to Philadelphia." Dr. Chen smiled. "Your father is." "This changes nothing," Garrett said, but the conviction was gone from his voice. "Those warrants are still active." "Not in Colorado," Cole interrupted. "The law here says you need a good reason to arrest someone. Do you have one, Sheriff? Or just orders from a crooked judge who is about to be arrested himself?" The deputies looked at the ground. Finally, Garrett sighed. "I need to think." "Think fast," Cole said, his voice low and dangerous. "Because if anyone tries to take her off my land, there will be a fight, and I promise you it will not be my blood that is spilled." Garrett mounted his horse. "You have got 24 hours. Then they were gone. "Is it real?" Amelia whispered to Dr. Chen. "It is," he said gently, handing her the folder full of bank records and telegrams. "I started looking into this the day you told me about your father. I could not let you face him alone." Cole looked at the doctor with newfound respect. "Sam, thank you." "Do not thank me yet," Dr. Chen warned. "Your stepmother, Victoria, is still in town. A cornered snake is mighty dangerous." As if the world agreed, thunder rumbled in the distance. Cole looked toward the dark clouds gathering over the mountains. "A storm is coming," he said. "A big one." "Those clouds are moving too fast," Dr. Chen noted. "That is not normal weather." "No, it is not," Cole said, already heading for the barn. "It means the river is fixing to rise, fast." "I am going with you," Amelia declared, grabbing a saddle before he could protest. "We are in this together, remember?" Cole stared at her, then let out a sigh. You are stubborn as a mule." They rode hard for the high country, leaving Dr. Chen at the ranch. By the time they reached the ridge, the rain was a downpour. What they saw below made Amelia's blood run cold. The river was already a raging monster, spilling over its banks. "The whole snowpack must be melting at once," Cole breathed. "We have got to warn the town. Now!" They raced their horses down the mountain as the first surge of water hit Main Street. People were screaming, trying to get to higher ground. Cole found the sheriff. "Garrett! The river is breaking. We have to get everyone to the church." Garrett, his face pale as a ghost, did not argue. He started shouting orders, and chaos erupted as they tried to save the town. Cole and Amelia split up, pounding on doors and pulling folks from buildings that were already starting to flood. Amelia found the schoolteacher, Mrs. Pritchard, trying to save books from the schoolhouse. "Leave them!" Amelia yelled, grabbing her arm just as her feet slipped in the current, pulling her towards safety. "Thank you," Mrs. Pritchard gasped. Across town, Cole heard screams coming from a collapsed boarding house. He and Dr. Chen waded into the churning, waist-deep water and started pulling debris away. They got 3 women and a boy out, but as Cole reached for the last woman, the building shifted. He dove in, grabbed her hand, and pulled with all his might. They both fell backward into the flood just as the rest of the house came crashing down. It takes a flood to wash away old hatreds. After Cole and Amelia pulled the last family from the rising waters, Redwood Valley was in ruins. But every single person was alive. They gathered in the old church, exhausted and covered in mud. Cole, who they'd feared for years, had saved them all. Amelia found him slumped against a wall, his body trembling with exhaustion. She took his hand and whispered, "We did it." But before the town could even catch its breath, Sheriff Garrett spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. "No," he said, looking straight at Cole. "You did it. You saved this town while the rest of us were still trying to figure out what to do. Half of us would be dead if not for you." That broke the dam. One by one, the folks he'd rescued stepped forward. Michael Patterson's mother, clutching her daughters, spoke through her tears. "Mr. Hawkins, we were wrong about you. We were cowards." She looked at the whole town. "But he is a hero, and if anyone tries to bother him or his wife, they'll have to come through all of us first." A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd. The very people who once crossed the street to avoid Cole Hawkins now stood ready to defend him. They formed a protective circle around him and Amelia, a wall of newfound loyalty. Just then, the church doors slammed open. Victoria stood there, drenched and furious, with 2 federal marshals behind her. "How touching," she sneered. "The monster plays hero, but the law doesn't care. That woman is a thief, and we are taking her." Michael, the young deputy, stepped right in her path. "The hell you are," he said, his hand resting on his gun. The lead marshal glared at him. "Son, you're sworn to uphold the law." Michael's voice was firm as an oak. "I'm sworn to uphold justice, and there is no justice in this." As the marshal reached for his own weapon, men all around the church stood up, ready to fight. Cole stepped forward. "Your choice, gentlemen. You can start a war you will not win, or you can walk away." The marshal saw the hard look in their eyes, holstered his gun, and turned to leave. "We were paid to do a job, not to die," he told a sputtering Victoria. Furious, she stared at Amelia. "You think you have won? My husband will destroy this entire town." Amelia, no longer afraid, simply said, "Let him try." After Victoria stormed out, a heavy silence fell over the room. Then Mrs. Pritchard began to clap. Soon, the whole church was filled with applause, a sound of gratitude that washed over Cole and Amelia. In that moment, surrounded by the town that had finally claimed them as their own, they both knew their pretend arrangement had become real. For 3 long days, the storm raged, forcing everyone into the church to wait out the flood. Cole and Amelia worked shoulder to shoulder, keeping spirits up while expecting the worst. They knew Victoria hadn't given up. She'd just retreated. On the 4th morning, the waters finally fell back. revealing a town torn all to pieces. But folks were alive. Mrs. Pritchard looked out at the ruin and said, "We'll build it all back." Cole stood beside her, looking ragged from exhaustion. "I've got lumber and tools at the ranch, whatever you need." She smiled. "Cole, you've already given us so much." "This is my town now, too," he said, his gaze finding Amelia. Mrs. Pritchard saw him looking. "That girl is good for you, Cole." "Better than I deserve," he admitted. "Son, we get what we fight for," she said. "And you've been fighting for her from the start." Just then, Sheriff Garrett ran up, waving a telegram and looking out of breath. "Cole, you need to see this." Cole read the paper, his face a mask of disbelief. "Is this real?" "As real as it gets," the sheriff grinned. "Judge Rothschild was arrested for fraud. The warrant for Amelia is gone. She's a free woman." Cole felt a weight lift off his soul. "She's free." "Victoria skipped town before they could grab her," Garrett added. Then his grin faded. "Cole, I owe you both an apology. I should have believed her." "You were doing your job," Cole said, cutting him off. Garrett shook his head. "I should have done it better." He offered a hand. "I'm glad I was wrong about you all." Cole shook it. "Does this mean you'll stop looking at me sideways?" "Probably not," Garrett chuckled. Cole found Amelia in the church, tending to an old man. The look on his face made her go still. "What is it?" He gently pulled her aside and handed her the telegram. The news hit her like a lightning strike. "He's arrested? The charges?" "Gone," Cole said, his own hands trembling. "It's over, Amelia. You're free." Tears streamed down her face as she finally whispered, "I'm free." She collapsed against him, and he held her tight while she cried out all the fear she'd held inside. When she finally looked up, he brushed a tear from her cheek. "So, what happens now?" "Now you're free to go anywhere," he said, his voice tight. "You don't have to be bound to this ranch or to me." "You think I'd leave?" she asked, stunned. "You are the dumbest smart man I've ever met, Cole Hawkins." She grabbed his face. "I stayed here because of you. I fell in love with you." Cole's world stopped turning. "You love me?" "Of course I love you, you fool," she said fiercely. "I choose you. I choose this town, and I choose being your wife. For real this time." He kissed her right there in front of God and everybody. When they came up for air, he whispered, "I love you too." The townspeople started cheering, but their joy was cut short by a rider galloping hard into town. The man nearly fell off his horse, his face caked with dust. When Amelia saw who it was, her blood ran cold. It was Thomas Brennan, the man who had abandoned her. "Amelia," he yelled, "thank God I found you." Cole stepped right in front of her, his hand on his gun. "You have 5 seconds to start talking." "Wait," Thomas pleaded, his hands up. "I didn't abandon her. I was arrested." "That's a convenient story," Cole said flatly. "It's the truth. Victoria Rothschild paid a lawman to lock me up on phony charges. By the time I got out, you were gone." He looked past Cole, his eyes full of regret. "I've been searching for you ever since." "Why should I believe a word you say?" Amelia's voice was shaking. Thomas pulled out a heavy leather pouch. "Because I got this back for you, every last dollar Victoria took." He explained how he'd used Victoria's own bank draft to force her to pay him back. Sheriff Garrett took the pouch, counting out what looked to be $2,000. Amelia couldn't breathe. "Why would you do this?" "Because I let a wicked woman buy me off," Thomas said. "I can't fix that, but I can give you what you were promised." Amelia took Cole's hand. "A fresh start is what I was promised. And I got it, just not from you." Later, a familiar figure rode up. It was Thomas, Amelia's ex-fiancé. He handed Cole a pouch of money. "Take care of her," he said, his voice full of regret. "She deserves it." Amelia stopped him. "Thank you for trying to make it right," she said. Thomas just gave a sad smile. "You were always braver than me." Then he rode off for good. Amelia looked at the money, then at the ruined town. She handed the pouch to the sheriff. "Give this to Mrs. Pritchard for the rebuilding," she announced. "I have everything I ever came here for." Mrs. Pritchard pulled her into a hug. "Welcome home, dear. Welcome to the family." As folks started planning the cleanup, Cole turned to Amelia, his eyes serious. "Marry me," he said. She laughed. "We are already married." He took her hands. "No, we did it out of fear last time. I want to do it right. I want to stand before this whole town and tell the world I choose you because I love you." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. "Cole, will you marry me, Amelia Hawkins, for real?" She did not hesitate. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." Their kiss was sealed by the cheers of their new family. Together, they all rebuilt Redwood Valley, not just with lumber and nails, but with a courage and hope that had been born from the flood. During those weeks of rebuilding, folks in Redwood Valley stopped seeing a monster and started seeing the man Cole Hawkins truly was. He worked harder than anyone and helped his neighbors without a lick of complaint. Amelia wasn't just some desperate bride anymore either. She was the heart of the recovery, using her own money and nursing the sick. They became family to the town. At the first service in the new church, Mrs. Pritchard announced a town celebration. But she kept a little secret about its real purpose, a surprise she was planning with a few close friends. On the day of the party, Mrs. Pritchard found Cole and Amelia. "Could y'all come with me for a minute?" she asked. In a small room, Dr. Chen was waiting with a big grin. "What in the world is going on?" Amelia wondered. "You two are getting married," Mrs. Pritchard said plainly. Amelia was confused. "But we are married." "Not the right way, you are not," the older woman declared, pulling a beautiful white dress from a trunk. "This was my daughter's. She would have wanted you to have it." "I suggested it," Cole admitted with a sheepish grin. "You gave up everything for me. The least I could do was give you a proper wedding." Amelia looked at the pure love in his eyes, and any thought of being upset just melted away. 15 minutes later, she stood at the church doors in that beautiful white dress. The whole town was waiting inside. "Ready?" Mrs. Pritchard whispered. Amelia smiled. "I have been since the day I met him." The preacher began. "Friends, we are here today to see a second chance. These two people found light in the dark. They showed this town what it means to stand for something. And now they will show us what it means to love." When it was his turn, Cole took a deep breath. "Amelia, I thought you were the bravest person I had ever met, and I was right. You took a broken man and showed him there was still good in the world. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you deserve. I love you." Tears streamed down Amelia's face. "Cole, you did not save me. You taught me how to save myself. You showed me I was worth fighting for, and I fell in love with you for it. I choose you today and forever." The preacher smiled wide. "Then I pronounce you husband and wife. Again. Cole, you may kiss your bride for real this time." And he did. The whole church erupted in cheers. When they parted, Cole whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For being brave enough to ask for help." "You were never a monster, Cole," Amelia said, touching his cheek. "Just a good man waiting for someone to see him." They walked out of that church not as strangers in a deal, but as partners who had fought for their love and won. As the sun set, they stood on the steps watching their friends and family celebrate. "Happy?" Cole asked her. "More than I ever knew was possible," she said, leaning against him. "Promise you are stuck with me now." He smiled. "Promise." Their story did not start with a desperate deal, but with the choice that being together was better than being alone and afraid. Love, they learned, was always worth the fight. The woman who begged the most feared cowboy for help did not just save herself. She saved him, too. And she saved a town that had forgotten how to stand together. Cole Hawkins proved that sometimes the folks this world calls monsters are just heroes, waiting for one person to believe in them. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.